Okay, I've had something strange stuck in my head all week. A pest control salesman. And before you think this is an episode about bugs, it isn't. It's about people because I almost missed one. And let's be honest, half the battle with answering the door nowadays is whether or not I have pants on. Because if it's before noon, there's a very real chance you're interrupting coffee, quiet time, or whatever version of getting my life together is happening that day. My house is my safe place. The minute I walk in, my social battery starts shutting down. So when the doorbell rings, my first thought usually isn't, I hope this is someone fun. It's, please let this be Amazon. But this day, I happened to be fully dressed and just getting back from an appointment. So I answered the door. And what did I see standing in front of me? A man in a business polo, a little Segway, and a pamphlet that I knew I was going to hear about. And honestly, I just felt like I needed to hear him out and allow him to say what he needed to say because we all need practice in our own version of a script, right? But keep in mind, I'm standing there with my espresso in hand. I hadn't even finished making my morning Americano, which, let's be honest, I did need that. But I saw something in him. I saw a little bit of me when I started my real estate career. I saw ambition and drive. I saw excitement in his eyes and a will to try to get the sale. The thing is, he wasn't hiding anything. He was trying to relate, and he was trying to make me a deal. And you want to know the first thing he asked me? Do you like bugs? And I giggled and said, yeah, because honestly, I needed to throw him a little bit. I mean, we all need that little bit of challenge to figure out what our next step is. But that's when I realized our conversation started to become human instead of transactional. I mean, he was still trying to sell me a pest control service, but there was something about him that was conversational, and he was trying to learn more about me. Because what do some of the best salespeople do? They believe in their product and they know it's going to make your life easier or better, right? So that was his goal, was to make my life better, because he could very obviously see the mud daubers that I had in the corners of my front porch that needed to come down. He said, we take care of that. Anyway, I tell you all this to say, I did send him away because I wasn't interested. But I started picturing how many people probably never looked him in the eye that day. And then I was thinking to myself, he's riding around in the Florida heat on that little Segway with no air conditioning, knocking on door after door and getting no's. How many times had he heard no thanks before he got to my house? But you know what the funnest part of this story is? He came back. He knocked on my door again and he said, I didn't try hard enough. And that was inspiring to me. And honestly, he probably has no idea that that is the reason I said yes to his sales pitch. And I ended up signing up for the pest control company and getting my first service that day. Because I know what it's like to put yourself out there hoping someone will give you a chance. I admired his persistence before I ever admired his product. He led with curiosity instead of pressure. He asked questions, he listened, he adapted, and he remembered details. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was trying to know me. And people don't usually remember the sales pitch, let's be honest. They remember how you made them feel. As I keep thinking about this interaction, I realize something. I have some incredible people in my life. And when I stop to think about the ones I admire the most, the ones I'm so fond of, and the ones I want to spend more time with, they all seem to have this same quality. They have this remarkable ability to make every person in the room feel special. They notice the person standing by themselves. They remember names, and they ask follow-up questions. They pull someone else into the conversation so no one feels left out. They make you feel like, for those few moments, there is nowhere else they'd rather be than talking to you. And I don't think that's accidental. I think that's one of the clearest reflections of Jesus we get to see in ordinary people. I've watched friends quietly include the outsider. I've watched people stop what they're doing just to make sure someone else feels known, understood, and welcomed. They're so aware of the people around them that they'll even gently nudge someone else to go love another person well. They'll quietly say, "Hey, would you go sit with her?" Or, "Can you make sure he feels included?" Or, "I don't think they've met many people yet." It's such a small thing, but it changes everything. They're paying attention to the people no one else seems to notice. And in doing that, they're teaching everyone around them to notice too. I have always admired that because that's what Jesus did. He saw people everyone else walked past. And I think some of the greatest examples God has given me aren't necessarily the people with the biggest platforms. They're the people who quietly make sure no one gets left behind. I want to become more like that. I hope there's something in me that draws people in, not because I'm entertaining or interesting, but because they feel valued when they're with me. And I also think God has intentionally placed people like that in my life as examples, little reminders of what love looks like when it's lived out in ordinary moments. I don't think people are desperate to be impressed. I think they're starving to be seen. Maybe that's why this silly interaction with a 20-year-old pest control salesman has stayed with me all week. It wasn't really about pest control at all. It was about curiosity. It was about presence. It was about slowing down long enough to remember that every person standing in front of us is carrying a story we know nothing about. And maybe the greatest ministry we have isn't speaking to crowds. Maybe it's making one person at a time feel seen. So let me ask you this. How many people do you think we're brushing past every day because we only see what they're asking from us instead of what they're carrying? Like the waitress, the cashier, the barista, the grocery clerk, your neighbor, the guy selling pest control. And by the way, let me just circle back around to this. I did find a couple things out about him. He has great music taste, like music from when I was growing up. I found out he goes to my church, and he's simply just trying to make a living. So here's your challenge. Lead with curiosity, because curiosity is one of the greatest forms of hospitality. It quietly says, "I see you, I'm interested, tell me more." We spend so much time talking that we forget to wonder. The people who leave the biggest impact on my life are rarely the loudest people in the room. They're the ones who make me feel interesting. And in the wild, I'm actually pretty good at giving strangers conversation. I love hearing people's stories. I love making people feel seen. But then I had to ask myself, do the people closest to me get that same version of Kelly? Or do they get the tired version, the distracted version? Or do they get the version that mentally is somewhere else? So, who gets my attention? And what does that say about what I value? Because the people who matter most shouldn't have to compete with the things that matter least. Being present is one of the purest forms of generosity we have left. I don't ever want to become so productive that I stop being present, because I have a feeling heaven keeps a different scorecard than I do. When you get to heaven, do you think God is going to ask how many things you accomplished, or how well you love the people he entrusted to you? Maybe the interruptions aren't interruptions at all. Maybe they're invitations. People aren't interruptions. They're image bearers, carrying stories we'll never know unless we slow down enough to ask. This week, ask one more question. Stay 5 minutes longer. Answer the phone or door. Call the friend you've been thinking about. Look up from your screen. Maybe knock on your neighbor's door. Don't rush past the interruption. You never know whose day might change simply because someone stopped long enough to see them. So in reality, this episode had nothing to do with bugs or being seen. I think it's about learning to see. There's a subtle difference. Most of us want to be noticed, but followers of Jesus are called to become people who notice the outsider, who notice the lonely person, who notice the exhausted salesman on a Segway, who notice the friend they haven't called in weeks, who notices the person quietly sitting by themselves at church. The invitation this week is this. It isn't to be seen, but it's to become someone who sees. And as always, take what you need, leave what you don't, and I'll meet you right back here next week for another sip.